be kind of a different video, and I don't even know when this one will be posted. It is right now November 3rd. And I wanted to do a video where I talked about the books I read for the year because I wanted to. But first, before I get too far into that, we have tea and mug of the day. The tea today is Constant Comment, which is one of my favorite teas. It's a black tea. It has a little bit of like orangey spice to it. Orange rind and like a sweeter spice. So less cinnamon, I would say, probably like more along the lines of cloves. I wanted to talk about the books that I read this year for a couple reasons. One, I love reading and I always have, and I think it's really hard to get back into reading. And two, I sometimes have this problem where I can like read really fast and then I kind of forget about the books that I read. So I started a book journal this year, which I had quite a hard time with actually, because my other book journal got all like ripped up. It got like soaked and everything bled out, and like all the ink and stuff. And then I was using another one. It was a spiral bound notebook, and I was better about keeping that one with me at all times, and then the spirals all came out. And so we found this old notebook, and I just wanted to keep my notes because honestly, I love sharing about the books that I read with my friends and family members. It wasn't like a competition. I wasn't trying to read as many as I could. I'm 26 now, just in case you guys don't know. So I graduated college in 2018. And I think a lot of people experience this thing where they loved reading like up until middle school, and then high school hits and they don't love reading anymore. I was lucky enough that I loved reading enough that basically up until my senior year of high school, I was reading a ton in addition to like what I had to read to school for enjoyment. My senior year of high school, I took AP Lit, which just, you know, you were reading so much additionally that I really didn't have a lot of time to read for fun. And then in college, I was a humanities major, so you're just like constantly reading papers and stuff. So like I wouldn't do a lot of on the side reading, and even over the summers, I just like I didn't know what I liked to read. So I kind of made it last year at the end of 2020. I found a couple books that I really liked, and I was like, you know what, like I want to get back into reading, and I'll just read stuff that interests me. And I really started doing that by just going after an author that I knew I liked. But like I said, I remembered liking Margaret Atwood. I also like books because I was an art history major that has something to do with something in art history. So I liked this book called The Luncheon at the Boating Party, which for those of you who don't know, The Luncheon at the Boating Party is a pretty famous Renoir painting. I actually, we went to Goodwill one time and there was like a brand new unused oven mitt of a scene of that book, and it was like $1. I was like, we have to buy this. I'll put the painting right here. So, okay. The first one I'm going to talk about is The Night Watchman, which is by Louise Eldridge. She's a Native American author, and she writes a lot of really great books, but I loved this book a lot. It was a little bit harder to get into it at first. It covers the life of, it's a multiple perspective story, which I have found in doing this that I tend to like a lot. Not if there's too many. If there's one or two or three, I'm usually pretty good. I'll talk later about a book that I absolutely hated, to be honest with you guys. This book is really great, really interesting. I'm trying to read a more diverse authors, just like being mindful of that. And so I really like her writing style. It takes place in like the 50s on a reservation, kind of as the Mormons are coming in. That's part of it. Also, you get to see about a woman who's like trying to break free. That's like the main character's perspective. And it's about, you know, changing times and losing traditions, gaining new traditions, what a society values as it goes through change, and also just the like terribleness of like just like pushing people off of land into reservations. In case you didn't know, that was not great. It was actually, it's a travesty, and it's like something we are trying so hard to hide and deny because we know it's an embarrassing part of our history rather than even just acknowledging it. And I think that focusing on like Native American authors and voices really helps. It allows it to be illustrated in a way that is factual and the backdrop of a story, and you just realize how commonplace everything seemed to be at the time. So you know, that was a good book. I'll talk a little bit just about all the freaking Margaret Atwood books. Like I said, she was the author that I knew that I liked. I read The Handmaid's Tale in high school, reread it again, and then I read The Testaments, which I really enjoyed. Margaret Atwood does a great job of blending together multiple narratives. I think I realize when it's done well, like in The Night Watchman and in most of her books, it comes off really well. I will talk about a book that I do not recommend that doesn't do that very good. So I read Alias Grace, I read The Blind Assassin, I read The Testaments, I read The Heart Goes last year, and then I also read one of her collections of short stories called So Alias Grace is really great if you like historical books. It blends again multiple perspectives. It's about the first murderess in Canada, and you know, you cannot tell if she is a reliable narrator or not when it's her point of view. It's about her case, the review of her case, why it made headlines, and also her life in prison and then thereafterward. Obviously a very captivating case at the time. A female murderess was a big deal. This takes place in what would be considered like the 1820s, like antebellum era, but it's in Canada. And it's a really interesting story. And then if you like this, I would recommend reading the book and then watching the series, but Netflix did do a limited series of it, and the series is okay. I think the book is much better, but if you have the book and then you watch the series, you can always fill in the parts that are kind of missing. But it is always nice to have like a limited series, so it's only like 6 episodes, and it's well done. Obviously the book is better. The Blind Assassin. The Blind Assassin is wild. It again weaves together 3 different narratives, but differently. It's not the same story told by 3 different perspectives. It's a woman telling you the story of her youth, and kind of honestly how like turn of the century, her very wealthy, well-to-do Canadian family kind of lost favor, and how she wasn't really prepared to not live as a wealthy person. Kind of an interesting perspective about just like changing times. It's kind of similar, I would guess, to a lot of the plot of like Downton Abbey, but they weren't royals. They had just been titans of industry, specifically in buttons. So that's like one storyline. The other storyline is her life now, reflecting on the past as a very old woman. And basically, as she is writing, you can tell it's getting more stream of conscious, and you can tell, again, she's becoming less of a reliable narrator, but more it's just like stream of conscious writing. And then the third narrative is a book that was published. It's called The Blind Assassin. In this story, this book was published as a large, essentially like disgrace to her family. It's kind of like a smutty alien invasion book, published under her late sister's name. And the book, I will say, is kind of slow in the beginning. But then as you start to read it, it gets really interesting. You get invested in the relationship between the 2 sisters, the sisters and their father, the sisters and like his wife / his mistress. And then like the main character's relationship with like her husband is really interesting. And it all comes together in the end. I will say there are a couple twists that are like, whoa, in it. I hope that doesn't ruin it for you guys, but there are some points in this book that are really great, and I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, it took me longer to read. It's quite long. It's at over 500 pages, if I remember. So, but once you get into it, you're into it. These other books I read last year, but The Heart Goes Last and The Testaments are both dystopic novels. So The Testaments is the sequel for The Handmaid's Tale. I will say I really, really enjoyed it. I had put off reading it for a little bit because I thought it was written too late after the fact, and oh, it's the TV show and blah 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 this, blah blah blah, but I was fully invested the whole time. You get a lot more answers about Gilead, you get more answers about what happens at the end to Offred, and I liked it. My mom brought some questions to it because I recommended it to her, and that is true. I wouldn't say it's like a juggernaut, like the perfect book, but I really enjoyed it. And if you liked those characters, or if you wanted to learn more about that society, I would recommend that. The Heart Goes Last is another dystopic novel, but takes place in a totally different world, where essentially outside is complete anarchy, and there are no rules, and that's something that my history teacher always told me. Mr. Fleeter, shouts out. The more you get away from like governmental control, the less like safety, guaranteed safety you're getting, right? So in this world, there's like very, very little governmental control. So the society isn't really that safe. And there is this opportunity for you to agree to live into like a totally gated, everything's provided for you, safe society, but you live 1 month in like this house, and then you live 1 month in essentially like a prison, but it's not like prison. You are doing work in prison and stuff like that. I can't really explain it. It's sold as prison, right? And you switch on and off, and essentially your month in prison is what pays for you that month, and everybody in the society has agreed to it. But there's a lot of rules, and once they're in it, you really realize what's happening. Again, another book that's told from a husband and wife's perspective, so multiple perspectives. But this one's different because it's multiple perspectives of the same story. Another really captivating read from Margaret Atwood. The last book of hers that I read was So Mattress, which is a collection. It's an anthology of some of her short stories. Short stories are not always my favorite thing. Some of her short stories I was like really into, and I wanted there to be more. And some were not that interesting, and I kind of skipped through. And some were just a little bit longer than I thought they should be. Like I felt they should be. I would recommend it. You can always pick and choose which short stories you read. What I did like about this is that in one of them, she talks about, there's this woman who wrote this fantasy world called Alphenland, and in it she talks about like a convention, and she talks about the Borg Queen, which means that Margaret Atwood is at least aware of Star Trek Voyager enough to know about the Borg Queen, which I just thought that's a fun tidbit for me personally. Let's see. Oh, I also read The Queen's Gambit this year, based off of, obviously, the show. I will say, I don't think you would be missing much if you didn't read the book. And I'm glad I watched the show before reading the book. I think I would find all the chess, like, because they describe the chess matches in the book. Because I could kind of think back to the show and be like, okay, so it's this match, stuff happens, she wins, she loses. There are a couple things that get changed out of the show, which I thought was weird. One of them being the fact that she was in the child home. So I would definitely say a trigger warning for that. That happens in like the first 2 chapters. Other than that, it was a good book. I definitely think the show did it justice. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you read the book first and you thought the show got it all wrong. But I would say it was pretty like shot for shot remake of the book, which I think was good. That one major change, and then of course a couple little changes, but definitely something that I enjoyed. And again, if you like the show, I would definitely say go ahead and read the book. But if you like aren't passionate about it, I wouldn't say you're missing much. Sorry about it. It's not bad. It's just I think the show does it like compared to like Alias Grace, right? Like you should definitely read the book and then you could watch the show. I would definitely say like The Queen's Gambit, just watch the show. You know? So then, the first book I actually read this year was this book called Monogamy, which was just some like random book I saw. Not what I thought it was going to be about. I kind of thought it was going to be about like a married couple who discovered polyamory, but it was about a woman who wakes up next to her husband who's died, and just like her navigating her life, because her husband was always the person that was there, that was bigger than life. They own this bookstore. He has like a previous wife and they're very close, and just like dealing with that. Again, a multiple perspective narrative, also told from his daughter's point of view and the woman, his like former wife's point of view, his ex-wife. I don't know why I keep saying former, ex-wife point of view, but they're all friendly. It's interesting read. It definitely, I think, hits on a lot of things that we have to deal with, that we don't like to deal with, about like grief, about death, about cheating, monogamy, obviously, about marriage, about life, and I really enjoyed that for it. I did cry while I read this book, for sure. the reality of it all. Again, this is like a realistic fiction book, so it's pretty close to home when that is the case, I think. And just dealing with such human emotions, I thought the writer did a fantastic job of fully like investing you in the story. Also, the concept about being mad at somebody who's dead, I think is really hard, and how to cope with that and deal with that, and just like all the struggles that come with grief. I know that it's something hard to talk about, and I really do not like talking about death and not, losing people. It makes me obviously very upset, like it does for a lot of people, but I found that book really cathartic when reading as well. Brought a lot of perspectives on it, and so I don't know, I would recommend the book. It's certainly not an easy read as far as content-wise goes. If you read it and you hate it, please let me know. I really remember enjoying it. This is the first book I read in 2021, so this was quite a while ago. But I just remember at the time really finding the book to be very, I don't know, it was like what I wanted, what I needed at the time. I don't know if that was just the case, but I definitely enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it. So they both die in the end, which is like a very popular like young adult novel. I really enjoyed. Again, you know what's going to happen at the end, but again, I love that it's a queer love story. I love, again, this is what I mean by like realistic fiction. So in this world, everything is the same except for there is this company called Death Toll or Death Call, and you get called the day you're going to die. They can't tell you how or why or when, but if you get a call, you will die that day. What I will say I see a lot of as painted in the story is there's a lot of like Oedipus Rex kind of stuff where it's like you're called, you're going to die, you go do the thing to enjoy it. So like the main characters, one of the two main characters' family, everybody in the family got the call that they were going to die that day except for him. Then they decide, well, we're going to go drive up to our house in the village or whatever, our house upstate, and they die on the way there. They fall into the lake. Well, if you weren't going to go do that, but you were going to spend your last day up at your house upstate, you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting. I would love to know the real, like, how that works, and that's something that's never answered. But that's what I mean by, like, realistic fiction, where, like, one thing is kind of fantasy or one thing is kind of sci-fi. Like, I don't know if that would still be classified as a realistic fiction book, but everything else is, like, true to life, right? Except for that. I loved the story. It was still so upsetting, even though you know the end. My best friend, the one I did that podcast with, had a teacher, and she used to say the same thing. But if something is written well, knowing a twist isn't going to change anything about it. You're gonna die in the end, you do, but you're still invested in this, or you're still even a little bit like, oh, they could make it, They don't make it. But I really enjoyed it. It's a non-white writer. It features two queer characters, which is really great, and I believe both queer characters are also not white people, which is just, representation matters. So I think it's important to promote stories like that, and it's so well done. It's so well written. It's so heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, and again, definitely deals with grief and death, especially for a society that has this thing, and how they monetize death and capitalize on top of it, but also how they still have like no acceptance of it in a lot of ways. It's very interesting if you wanted to think about that. Okay, so I also read The Dutch House, which is really great. Another book where it's told from one perspective, but the perspective is clearly not the main character. Kind of like in The Great Gatsby, it's told by Nick's perspective, Nick Carraway, I'm pretty sure his last name is, but he is not the main character. Gatsby, or Daisy, is the main character. In this book, obviously, the Dutch House is like the main character, and I like it also because it takes place in Elkins Park outside of Jenkintown, which is pretty close to where I grew up, just outside of Philadelphia. So I feel like anytime there's a book about like your hometown area, everybody who's from that area is a little bit more like, I love it, it's so good, it's about me, you're a little bit more like, I'm the main character in this book actually. So there's that, but I think I really enjoyed it. Again, another realistic fiction book. Again, a kind of fun historical, timepiece. Takes place over the course of like the 40s through like the 70s, 80s, if I'm recalling. Ann Patchett, I really liked her writing. I have other books of hers now on hold because I want to read them. And I enjoyed it. Tom Hanks reads the audiobook if you guys like audiobooks. I also listened, this is the only audiobook that I listened to this year, called The Judgment of Paris, which is famously, it's a wine book. It's like it's a historical, real historical book. I don't know why I can't say that, which talks about the history of wine in the US and how like Prohibition and how like wine initially got planted here, how things went during Prohibition, the setup after Prohibition, and then the 1976 tasting done in Paris of California wines to Parisian wines, which is really what put California on the map as a viable, like, good wine comes from here story. It talks about all that. If you're interested in wine, if you're interested about the history of alcohol, even if you're not really interested in drinking wine, but just like the history of wine, highly recommend. I would say read it. I only listened to it on audiobook because that was what was available to me on Libby. I think I missed some context stuff that I couldn't go back and double check because I was listening to it. I personally do not think that I handle audiobooks well. While I love podcasts and stuff, even so, like, I've listened to like every episode of The Last Podcast on the Left, and I should know, like, Aaron and I both listen to that podcast, and he'll bring up serial killers that I like know once I hear the story, but like by name alone, I do not. I don't think I retain the information as well. I think I need that like visual reading it to remember it kind of stuff, but I loved that story. Again, obviously I'm very interested in wine. And then if you listen to that, I would definitely listen to the Wine for Normal People episode about the Judgment of Paris and how maybe it wasn't a super fair judgment, but it is a very cool story. It's how the US and specifically California beat Paris at their own game in Paris. It's very interesting. So much politics, so much wine politics, and there's so much information too about how Prohibition really set us back in terms of like understanding wine and things like that, but also how once we came back after Prohibition, how much knowledge was willing to be shared amongst vintners and vineyard and growers, and why that is so important. I will say the audiobook is also like a little long. Like, I don't think I ever actually finished the book because I'm pretty sure even after they had like won the thing in Paris, we talked a little bit about that, there was still like another hour to listen to, and I was like, I can't. What are we going to talk about? I was like, I'm kind of over it, but I think if I had owned it or like had it, I would have read to the end. But you know, by far my least favorite book. It was called Into the Water, and it's by the person who wrote Gone Girl and Girl on the Train, or just Girl on the Train. If they're written by the same person, I don't know. So look, this book is set up to be good. It's like a small town in Britain, but honestly, it could just be Salem, Massachusetts, okay? There is a lot of kind of witchy stuff happening. There's a drowning pool at the end of this lake that everybody grew up playing in, and people mysteriously die there, and, you know, historically, that's where they drowned witches. It has all the setup to be what I feel would be like a fantastic book, right? All that appeals to me personally. All of that's pretty interesting. We got mystery, we got witchy things. So again, realistic fiction, but in this world, at the very least, people believe witches are real a little bit more than we do now. And I was like, okay, yeah, like this sounds pretty good. Murder mystery. Somebody ends up dying in the town. The main character's mom, okay. This book is told from, no lie, like 15 different perspectives. It's too many, especially because you don't know who all the characters are as they're switching all the time. So like randomly halfway through the book, there's this like old crouchety like woman named Nikki who starts telling it from her perspective, and she's got a backstory, and everybody's got a secret backstory, and everybody has a complicated past, and everybody could be, you know, it's like watching Clue. It's like, but it's not campy or fun, and Tim Curry's not there, so it's like, why am I reading this? And it's like, you are trying to figure out who did it, obviously, but every single point of view is basically trying to lead you to you doing it in a way that I think is a little like hit you over the head with it. And on top of that, there is a plot point where, I'm gonna say this, one of the characters in the book, the girl whose mom killed herself, which is how we start the story, in the drowning pool, supposedly, right? Her best friend is also later found dead because she was sleeping with a teacher and nobody wanted to tell her mom this. And so nobody knew that this was going on. And multiple different perspectives all throughout the story are like, no, it's okay. It's one thing for her other 15-year-old friend to say that in the story, but there are like adults that are like, yeah, I guess it was just like a different kind of relationship, a different kind of love. The justification by multiple characters of this young teenage girls with an authority figure of power who's also like double her age was so gross and so commonplace. I kept being like, what is happening? And then I would say the solving of the mystery wasn't satisfying because it wasn't like it was, I guess, a twist, but it was like doing too much. I just really feel like it was not good. I do not recommend it. Again, there was that weird kind of justification of like a teacher with a 15-year-old girl. And again, they like multiple times bring it up, even from her friend's perspective. They kind of try to explain to her friend how it's not okay. And she's like, you guys just don't understand, their love was different. And hey, everybody who's 15 thinks that. Like, I'm going to tell you this right now. If you are underage watching this video, nobody who is 25 or 22 or 21 even really wants to be hanging out with kids under than like 18. You know, it's just, he's not interested in you. It's not because you're so mature. It's not because of that. It's because he wants to take advantage of you, or he feels that he could. You know, why are we justifying this in a book that was written in like 2015? It's so bizarre. One more before we talk about my cozy mysteries. I read Circe, which I, for the longest time, was calling Cirque, like a dum-dum, until one of the 9th graders at school corrected me. I was like, oh, you're reading Cirque? And she was like, Miss Connor, it's Circe. And I was like, oh, I knew that. I think it was one of the best books I read. A really great concept talking about what the hero's journey is, what it means to be immortal, what it means to be alive, all really interesting. It's told by the perspective of somebody who is essentially like the daughter of a titan and a nymph. So she's like a lesser kind of god, not even a god. And you get to see, I would say, a fair amount of like, if you liked Greek mythology, if you liked the Percy Jackson series, if you liked reading about Greek mythology, if you liked the Iliad, if you liked the Odyssey, you will like this book. If you liked Hercules, you will like this book. There is like a lot of greatest hits kind of feel. You get to see Odysseus, you get to hear about Icarus. That's really great. So if you were into that stuff as a child, which honestly, I thought almost all kids were, but Aaron was telling me that he was not that interested in mythology growing up. And I was like, oh, that was something I felt like every kid was like down to learn about. Roman mythology, especially Egyptian mythology. I feel like people were like, this is choice social studies class. I really liked it. Definitely written for adults though. Another book I think that causes a fair amount of self-reflection. The characters doing a lot of self-reflection throughout the story. Again, what does it mean to be alive? What does immortality really mean? How does that affect your life? I know Book Talk has already done kind of a great job of like promoting this book, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but if you trust my opinion more than Book Talk, I really like it. Now, if you comment down below that you don't like any of these books, that's fine, but please give me a reason. So recently joined a book club. We read The Red Tent, and I liked that book. Honestly, I found it quite similar to Circe, as far as like the hero's journey, traveling. It also reminded me quite a bit of The Alchemist in that way. The Red Tent is a good book, definitely a good read. I liked it. It's really about like sisterhood and womanhood and motherhood and what that really means. What I found the most interesting about it was definitely the concept of like midwifery being an escape for women, being a way that women could be independent. And I enjoyed that aspect of it. I just was at a book club meeting where we talked about it for like 2 hours. There's a lot more to say about it. what I thought was cute was my mom said that was the first book her book club read like 15, 20 years ago. So that was cool. To be honest with you, I found it to drag a smidge. And I didn't like love the writing, I guess I would say. The characters are enthralling and interesting. So the lack thereof, I thought, of like amazing writing is kind of lost, I guess. But wasn't my absolute fave, but I definitely would recommend it, which I know is kind of like a weird recommendation. Definitely worth reading, definitely important to read. And if you're starting a book club, it's a great book to start your book club off of. So now we have come to Cozy Mystery Corner. Remember in the beginning of this video, I know this video has been long, I talked about like judging the books my mom read. I read this one cozy mystery called Killer Chardonnay. And I had to buy the next two in the series. I had to read them. They weren't on Libby. Couldn't even get them like free for Kindle or even like pay for Kindle to get them so I could read them. I went out to the bookstore and I bought them. And I have the last one in the series here called Mold to Death. As a teenager, I was being so judgmental to my mom. As an adult who was like constantly stressed about work and just like needs to like brain off read to escape. Oh my God. I cannot recommend cozy mysteries enough to you guys. I like these ones because they do center around wine. So the first one was called Killer Chardonnay. The next one's called A Pairing to Die For. And the last one is called Mold to Death. This one literally came out, was published October 5th, and I bought it once it was available on the Barnes & Noble. They are predictable, cheesy, easy to read. And then I read another one, not about wine, called A Crafter Quilts a Crime. I liked that one. I would say probably like quality and like danger wise a little bit more. That's the third in the like crafter series one. So I have recently discovered that cozy mysteries are like an entire genre of like not super spooky mysteries. Typically, I would say like always with a female lead, always her who solves the mystery, always see something the police won't see. There is a whole separate genre of like wine cozy mysteries, but these ones, the ones that I like, are all about this. They're a Colorado wine mystery. And what I personally get like offended by in it is like some of the wine information is like a little bit wrong. So what I will say is obviously wine taste wise is like subjective, and you know, opinions about wine differ across the board, but this person is supposed to be owning like a winery and a tasting room in Colorado, so supposedly she knows a lot about wine, always describing Chardonnay as jammy, and very rarely would I say that that is my description of Chardonnay, and if it was, it would not be a compliment. And then in this book she says she gets trapped on a balcony at night, locked out, power turned off. They were in the jacuzzi up on the rooftop, right? She's scared she's gonna freeze to death. She says something like she would rather stick her hand in a pressure distemper than be where she is. No, ma'am. There are very few situations I can imagine I would rather stick my hand down a moving pressure distemper, and that, as scary and awful as that sounds, that is not it. A pressure distemper sounds terrible to stick your hands on the center of. It's a no from me. It truly is. I can't. I would not. So it's a little bit like she's like the main character is kind of like a little bit of like a Becky in some ways, but it is a cute story. I do like them. I think they're fun to read. They're like low stakes books. I gave my mom The Pairing to Die For, and I fully, wholeheartedly expect her to pass it on to other people, and I will never see that book again in my life, which is fine. The book was like $8, $9, which I know can be a lot of money. And I'm not trying to say like I can throw around money like it's nothing. I'm just saying that in my mind, books are meant to be shared. And so I don't want to like hold on to a book for dear life. I hope many people read that book and get enjoyment that I got out of it. Interest you have has been made into a cozy mystery. I like wine and I like embroidery. So I was able to read one that centered around a craft store in Wisconsin, and I was able to read one about wine. And there's tons of them about wine. There's ones that are set in like Victorian England. That one has like 20 books in the series. I was just reading the first one, but I like couldn't get into it. There's one that's about like plant shops. There's another one that centers around desserts. There's another one that centers around baking and cooking. I have another one on hold on my Libby app right now about being a secondhand thrift store. It's got a little witchy, a little bit of secondhand, store stuff going on for it. I'm 100% there. Couldn't lie to you. Cannot lie to you about this. I'm fully invested. Okay, everybody, so I know this is going to be a bit of a change up setup wise, but we just had Christmas here, so the kitchen set up a little differently, and it would have been harder to set that up, and I thought the tree was a nice backdrop. I'm just going to finish up with the rest of the books I read this year. Obviously it's a different day. I'm wearing the same shirt, but like a different undershirt, and obviously my hair is different. Honestly, I doubt any of you have seen me with my hair up. I don't wear my hair up very often. I've never been like a hair up type of gal. Even when I played sports, like I always did braids, and when I work at the winery and stuff, I do braids. I don't really like my hair up, but I had some errands to run today, and I got this little like cute little scrunchie, and I have one in green from Old Navy. And I like it. I like playing with my hair so much, and I feel like it's definitely like a security thing. I'm like trying to pull out enough tendrils that my hair still looks cute. Whatever. Like honestly, like a lot of people don't see me wear my hair up. Like I very rarely do it as like the look for the day. I also am not having tea. I'm having some wine. So when I first recorded this video, I edited a lot of it out because I was just talking. Y'all know how I talk with the intro and the videos, but it was like 2 days after I had left my old job, and now we're like past Christmas, obviously, because I needed to do the book. So I have a new job. I'm a wine consultant at a store. I really love it. I'm new, so I'm still learning so much, but I get to learn so much, work with so much wine. And I'm having a wine that I picked up from the store in a gift I got for Christmas. This is the Wine Folly wine glass. This is a California Cab, a Rutherford Cab. It's pretty good. It's definitely more of a me wine versus like an Aaron wine. And we had a little bit left, and it's a few days old now. It's been open, and there was only a little bit left in the bottle. I didn't want it to go bad. So I thought I would talk about it. It's from this brand Acclaimed, which we had at the store, and it looked interesting. So I said I would try it. Honestly, I don't always go for California, especially cabs can be so heavy. Like if I'm going to do a cab, I'd rather do like not a California cab or like a blend from like Bordeaux. But I do like a heavier red, or like if I want a single varietal red, I'll go Cab Franc if I can. But this is nice. It's got a nice kind of like velvety, I haven't tasted it today, but it's quite smooth. It's definitely like getting a little bit more oxidized, so I'm glad I decided to have it today. So I just have a couple more books to talk about. I know this video has been long. I've been working on editing it all day. So I wanted to talk about the rest of the books I read this year. Like I said, just to do it, and then I got to do like a little bit of an outro. So I just finished talking about cozy mystery. So I read Killer Chardonnay, A Pairing to Die For, and Mold to Death. And then I also read A Crafter Quilts a Crime. And then I just finished Secondhand Spirits, which I really liked, by Julia Blackwell. I really liked that one. I think character-wise, it's a little bit better than the wine one that I was reading, the Colorado Wine Mystery. It's about a girl who's like a witch. Like, she is a witch, flat out. There are demons in this world, so it's a little bit different than the other ones. Because, again, it falls into that, like, thing where it's, like, realistic fiction, but one thing is true in this world, and there is another world, and there are witches and ghosts, and spirits, and necromancy, and, like, all of that is real. Takes place in San Francisco. She owns like a vintage shop. I liked the first one so much. I wanted to read the second one. Went out to the Barnes & Noble because, of course, Libby didn't have the other ones. And the only one they had at the Barnes & Noble was like the most recent one in the series, which I'm holding off reading. But I like that one. The stakes are a little bit higher, and I think a little bit more interesting. There's a little bit more plot to play with because witches are real, and like in this world also like voodoo is real, and like all of that stuff is real. So there's just a little bit more to play with. Narratively, I think. The Hobbit. I read The Hobbit for the first time ever. I kind of talked about this a little bit. Like, I was like not into other fantasy books outside of, you know, HP. Just because I was that person, of course. And so I read The Hobbit because Aaron and I watched all the movies. He rewatched them. I watched them for the first time because Aaron really loves them. And I have this thing where like, if the screen is on long enough, I will get fully invested in it. So he just like turned on the extended cut movies and I just got fully invested. So he told me I should read The Hobbit, which I hadn't read. And I read it and I liked it. I mean, people have written dissertations on Tolkien, but I would say if you find the Lord of the Rings series like interesting, you want to get involved, The Hobbit's a pretty quick read. It's not as like high fantasy, crazy, intense as like the Lord of the Rings series is, because I have like I'm like 7 pages into the Fellowship of the Ring. Okay, started it is a bit of an understatement there, but I have like technically started it. And The Hobbit's pretty easy to get into, a good hero's journey story, and it sets up the story of the Lord of the Rings. It's pretty interesting. Again, like, I don't know what else to say about it. People have written so much and talked so much more about Tolkien, and I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, I like The Hobbit. If you wanted to start reading it and you were like, I don't know where to start, The Hobbit's a good place to start, obviously. It's technically the first in the series. We have not seen the Hobbit movies yet, though, so I know people don't like them. That seems to be the consensus online. Oh, I talk so much about this ponytail, and now I'm like seeing it in the viewfinder. And here's the other thing. I have like very fine baby white person hair, like straight up. My hair is like hay, like straw, like little angel hair pastas. And so everything hurts my head all the time. Like I have to be very careful. Like certain scrunchies I can't use, clips. If I clip too much, it hurts. My hair is so fine and so thin. And so I feel like it's hurting a little bit. Okay. The other book I read, one of the other books I read is A Doll's House, which is actually a play that I read in high school because it was my turn to pick a book for the book club, and I picked that book. And I was very excited to do it. I read that book in high school. If anybody else was in that class with me, from HH, you know, that was such a fun play to read. It always has stuck in my mind. And so I had read it again, like a few years back, but I was excited to read it and discuss it with people again. And honestly, I would say if you want to read more, but you're a little bit like unsure what to read, reading plays I've always really enjoyed, mostly because there's like, it's hard to be confused like about who's talking with a play. Plays can be very straight and to the point. And because of that, you can really focus on like the dialogue and the character development. And it doesn't get overwhelming because, you know, plays are written like scripts and set directions. So, like, yeah, reading Shakespeare might be a little bit more confusing. But, like, there's a lot of plays. I also remember really enjoying Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is also a play. And I'm just saying, like, if that's something like dialogue is something that sometimes can be a little confusing for you, I like that about plays. I also always recommend reading a play before you go see a production. Just because there's always going to be little things that you miss having been in the theater. I wasn't in the theater. I did stage crew for like 2 years in high school, but you learn so much the more. It's like watching a movie or a TV show that's well played out, and plays are like that. You're gonna miss stuff. So reading the play beforehand is helpful, I think, to see all the notes and see the visualization of the characters, right? It's about this woman named Nora Helmer who has this like big secret. It's written by a Icelandic playwright. And there is a movie of it starring Anthony Hopkins. I don't like the movie. We talked about it and then we watched that movie and the movie of it. Honestly, I did not enjoy that interpretation of it. But the play is really good. It's about this woman. It's kind of a la, I find it similar to like The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Kind of that that era of like women coming into their own, discovering what it means to be independent, and like no longer just wanting to be essentially a doll in a doll's house. And so the last book that I'm going to talk about is called The Final Girl Support Groups by Grady Hendrix. He has written a lot of fantastic books, including A Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and Horror Store and My Best Friend's Exorcism, but I haven't read that book yet. And then his newest book is called The Final Girl Support Group. And if you want to talk to him more, I would definitely, or if you want to like learn more about him, Last Podcast on the Left did like an exclusive Patreon interview with him, but they released it to the public on like Thanksgiving. So if you go back, you can listen to the interview they did with him, which is really cool. But he writes cool premised books. I also recommend A Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires and Horror Store if you haven't read either of those things. But I'm not going to talk about them. I didn't read them this year and this video is already so long. Final Girl Support Group kind of centers, well, not kind of, it does center on the idea of like, we live in a world where 80s slasher flicks actually happened, which is kind of true because like a lot of those stories are based off true events. And it kind of talks about maybe like the dark side of all of our obsessions with true crime. As somebody who grew up learning about like cults always are so fascinating to me, and true crime, and like, I don't want to be like, I was into it before it was popular, but I always remember being really interested into it. Like I remember in 4th grade being like, when are we going to learn about Jonestown? Because I had seen both the History Channel documentaries. And there is such a fascination with people currently with true crime, and also like immortalizing awful characters and kind of demonizing or trivializing the victims. And it's really important if you are a true crime fan to be an active true crime fan and what that really means, you know, and working on that. So anyways, this story is about all those slasher fics are real, and there's a support group for women that have been essentially the final girls. We all kind of, I'm assuming if you like kind of cheesy horror slasher fic like Friday the 13th, Halloween, like Prom Night, there's a bunch of them. You guys know what I'm talking about. Where basically there's an archetypical group of friends. There's like the token person, there's the jock, there's the like the slut, there's the geek, and then of course there's the perfect virgin, right? Like what we imagine as a society as quote unquote the perfect victim, right? That's one of the things that we have discovered in our making of true crime, is that we as a public really need the victim to be perfect and have done nothing wrong in order to garner our sympathy, which is absolutely wrong. And they're always the person that lives in these slasher flicks, and they always have to, and the perfect, you know, the virgin, whatever, always ends up having to kill the bad guy, right? And what's special about these girls is that they've been re-victimized by people who knew about their cases and have tried to recreate them, right? Kind of like a la Scream. And so they go to this support group, and all of them there, and it's told by the perspective of one of the girls, and she's kind of weird about telling her story, but she'll tell you everybody else's. And the catalyst for the start of the story is that somebody killed off one of the women in their group at the camp. So her story was basically like her summer camp when she was a counselor got destroyed by this man. She had to kill him. She later on bought the camp and turned it into a place for women, like a women empowerment camp where like you could go struggling with domestic abuse. She took all of the girls from the support group there, and then essentially during the summer it's a day camp, and all of them did different things. One of the like founders of the group like worked really hard for the advocate rights of like women who get these stories essentially made about them, movies, and using their story, saying that they should be the people making the money from it, you know, all of that. So it's a pretty interesting premise, but somebody is trying to kill off all the girls in the final girl support group, and they have to figure out how and why. And as you're doing that, you're learning more about the lead main character story and how she has like weird guilt about her own story and about how she maybe doesn't feel like she fits in. You get to see one of the fallen girls from the final girl support group who turned kind of to that romanticization of, you know, these masterminds, these murderers, these awful, terrible people who victimize other people and is like selling stuff on the dark web, like memorabilia. We see one of the girls is like struggling with addiction because of all the terrible things that happened to her. And they kind of leave it kind of blank, but her story seems incredibly dark. Another woman has just become incredibly wealthy and seemingly does a lot of stuff to kind of like protect herself with her wealth around her. And you find out who is doing this and why. And there's a couple twists and turns. I think Grady Hendrix does a good job. A few of his books have fantastic twists in them, but they're not, it's like not that the story relies on the twist, the story just includes a twist, which is nice. And it's a twist that makes sense. So just to wrap up about the Final Girl Support Group, out of all of the books of this author I read, this one was probably my least favorite, but it's still a fantastic book, one of the top ones I read this year. I definitely enjoy his writing, and if you want to learn more about him or you just are, that's all the books I have read this year. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, this wasn't a competition. This wasn't a like, I read this many books. I had a hard time figuring out what my preference in books was after going so long with kind of not really reading for pleasure for so long. Like I said, by my senior year of high school, I was so busy, and then in college, I barely read. And so I had a hard time figuring out what it is that I like to read and why I would like to read it. And I was so pretentious in high school about only reading classics and not really intersectional in my understanding of who decides what gets to become a classic and what doesn't. And honestly, I hope to grow, learn more, change all of that stuff going into 2022. And I'm probably going to do another video like this at the end of 2022, just because it's a fun like diary for myself. 1, 2, it forces me to keep track of what I'm reading and also come up with like actual analysis of why I like or don't like something instead of just I don't like it. And 3, I just think it's fun. It might be fun to like rewatch this video in a few years and be like, oh, I hate those books now, or oh, my book club still meets, or oh man, remember when I read that book for the first time, or just have a good time. So I would say if you're somebody who's like maybe struggling to figure out what books you like, don't be so serious about it. I think that's the thing. It's like, I want to read books that I like, so I know that I like certain things. I do like cozy mysteries, and like I said, there's literally a cozy mystery for all of your interests. Or maybe struggling to find out what you like. If any of these books sound like they piqued your interest, I would definitely post in there. If you have any books that you read this year that you absolutely loved, leave it in the comments. Or if you disagree with any of my opinions and you didn't like it, that's totally fine, but please give a reason. A reason for why you didn't like it. So thank you guys all for watching, and have a great day. Bye. So just to wrap up about the Final Girl Support Group, out of all of the books of this author I read, this one was probably my least favorite, but it's still a fantastic book, one of the top ones I read this year. I definitely enjoy his writing, and if you want to learn more about him or you just are interested in him, I definitely recommend listening to his interview from last podcast on the left. They, I think, were exclusively on Spotify, but even if you didn't have a Spotify subscription, you could like pick and choose what episode you want to listen to, but I think they are now back on the Apple App Store, but I know for a fact they're on Spotify, and like I said, they released that episode like the day of Thanksgiving, so it should be back in like the November plot point. And I think with that, that's all the books I have read this year. Now, like I said in the beginning of this video, this wasn't a competition. This wasn't a, like, I read this many books. I had a hard time figuring out what my preference in books was after going so long with kind of not really reading for pleasure for so long. Like I said, by my senior year of high school, I was so busy, and then in college, I barely read. And so I had a hard time figuring out what it is that I like to read and why I would like to read it. And I was so pretentious in high school about only reading classics and not really intersectional in my understanding of who decides what gets to become a classic and what doesn't. And honestly, I hope to grow, learn more, change all of that stuff going into 2022. And I'm probably going to do another video like this at the end of 2022 just because it's a fun like diary for myself, 1. 2, it forces me to keep track of what I'm reading and also come up with like actual analysis of why I like or don't like something instead of just I don't like it. And 3, I just think it's fun. It might be fun to like rewatch this video in a few years and be like, oh, I hate those books now, or oh, my book club still meets, or oh man, remember when I read that book for the first time, or just have a good time. So I would say if you're somebody who's like maybe struggling to figure out what books you like, don't be so serious about it. I think that's the thing. It's like, I want to read books that I like, so I know that I like certain things. I do like cozy mysteries, and like I said, there's literally a cozy mystery for all of your interests. 2, I like books that are not high fantasy, but there's something true. They're pretty close to life, but something might be different that makes it a little bit more interesting. And 3, I like books about like art history pieces, because like I said, I majored in art history, and I like enjoyed that, like learning of, like I said, The Lunch and the Voting Party, The Girl with the Pearl Earring, The Lady in Gold. I like those books. They're fun to read, and I really do recommend the Libby app. I mentioned a couple of times that Libby like didn't have a book, but it's fine. It's like not that serious if they don't have a book. I can get it another way. I don't mind supporting authors or anything like that. It's just, for me, I really enjoy using Libby. And like I said, it's completely free, and you get to support libraries, which I think is so important, to be honest with you. And I like supporting libraries. Libraries were a big part of my life growing up, and I hope they continue to be a big part of people's lives and community facets and assets. And so it's such a small thing to do. All you have to do is download an app, connect your library card, and you have access to your entire, I think like state, or maybe like it's county, depending on how your state does libraries, their online collection. So sometimes it does mean maybe they won't have a book, but your local library might still have it. And you can get audiobooks and magazines. And yes, it does mean you have to read it or listen to it on a phone or a tablet or something like that. But I've honestly, even on my phone, I like it because before bed I can do it too, because the Libby app on your phone is like black with white text, and I really like that. It's a way to still like be quiet on my phone, but I don't have to have the light on, and because you know that could bother Aaron, and I basically fall asleep almost every night reading when I'm doing it actively. Sometimes I don't, but when I'm into a book, and it's a great way to read those little cozy mysteries, I guess. And you know, you can explore on it and find authors you like. I would definitely say if you're maybe struggling to find out what you like, if any of these books sound like they piqued your interest, I would definitely post in there. If you have any books that you read this year that you absolutely loved, leave it in the comments. Or if you disagree with any of my opinions and you didn't like it, that's totally fine. But please give a reason. A reason for why you didn't like it. Yeah, and you know, if you're maybe struggling, I honestly, I really like having a book club, and book clubs are something you can do in person, not in person. They can really fit your schedule. My book club meets like once a month, and because I was like getting a new job in the midst of all this, they've been really flexible. I mean, it's only the three of us, but yeah, I really enjoy it. It's really fun. It's nice to just like go to people and talk about a book that you guys read and just share your opinions, have some wine or some tea or just like some food, and I really enjoy it. So, you know, I hope you guys have a great 2021, safe and happy holidays. For whatever you're celebrating. This is definitely going to be my last video of 2021, obviously, because this is hopefully going to go up on the 30th or the 31st. But I do have some exciting things planned for the upcoming year. I'm about to film part 1 of what will be a very long in the making video for 2022. Maybe I'll also do this video again. But yeah, I hope you guys liked it. Let me know if you're like not into, well, don't be mean. You can't take much critique, but if you guys are into this kind of content, that would be cool to know. If not, like I said in my other video, I'm not going to be doing anti-MLM stuff all the time because it's not really what I want to do all the time. I like talking about it, I really do, but I feel much more at peace not talking about it all the time. Although I do want to, well, I do want to do like a deep dive into those ones that sell wine. I would love to see if I could get my hands on some of that wine because I would be very interested to try it once I have some of my certifications. But yeah, cheers. Happy holidays or Happy New Year. Oh, a reminder. Do not let anybody trick you into fucking diet culture at the start of the year. I already saw one post that was like, did you eat too much? Like the day after Christmas. Did you eat too much? Please don't do that. 1, you don't have to earn food. And 2, don't do it. And if you're thinking about posting something like that, don't do it. It's honestly just like unacceptable in my opinion. But maybe that's a little harsh. It's not necessary. Nobody needs it. So. All right, outfit change, and in a year from now, you will probably see the intro to this video, if I remember to do it. So thank you guys all for watching, and have a great day. Bye.